deck quite a lot. So it's talking about Nomad now, but I hope that's okay with the audience here.
It's fine.
Seems legit.
Seems legit. I like that.
All right, we're live. So welcome everyone today to our KubeCon session. Oh no, I hear the video playing in my other browser. That's okay, we'll try that again because now I can hear myself and it's uncomfortable. Trying again. Welcome everyone, we are live and we're at KubeCon for a Waypoint deep dive demo today. Just before Mishra kicks us off with slides and gets started, I just want to say hi, I'm Jacquie Grindrod and I'm a developer advocate here at Hashicorp, and we're going to be taking any questions that you have in chat. So we'd love for you to interact with us. We want to hear your thoughts, we want to hear your questions, but please just keep in mind that we do have a code of conduct in this virtual space. So in general, just be welcoming, inclusive, friendly, and patient. Be considerate, respectful, and professional. So you can review our code of conduct if you have any questions at hashicorp.com/community-guidelines. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mishra to get started.
Thanks, Jacquie. I appreciate it. So today we're going to be talking about Waypoint workflows in a Kubernetes world. Of course, this is the KubeCon special for us. And we have an overview of Waypoint. We have things that are upcoming in the project since it was just released in October. And yeah, we have live demos, which is always exciting, always, and luckily I'm not doing them. So it's Cody and Jacquie who are going to do them. So a bit of a context and kind of background on me. So my name is Mishra. I'm Build 1.0 on Twitter. I'm the technical advisor to the CTO. I work in the office of CTO on strategic things and like the next 2 to 5 years for HashiCorp. With context to Waypoint, I've actually involved, from I think day one of the project, did a bunch of product research work for Waypoint. And then also was privileged enough to work on a plugin, the Azure ACI plugin that hopefully people are using today. So yeah, it's been an exciting ride for us. Really excited to share some of the things here today. So I'll hand it off to Cody for his intro.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Cody. I do technical marketing for HashiCorp. Usually we get bucketed into projects or products, but I kind of float all over the place these days. So you can find me on Twitter at Cody Arkland. Just like everybody else, I love interacting with folks on there. So if you have questions about what you've seen in here, you want more details on the demo stuff, you want to dig in a little bit further, any of us will answer questions. We love engaging. We'll probably end up tagging each other to talk about it. So happy to be here.
Absolutely, and you already know Jacquie. Jacquie introduced herself and in the beginning here. So I'll kick us off here quickly, and we want to get to the demos as quickly as possible. But I just do want to set the stage and kind of give you some context on Waypoint. So Waypoint is one of the 2 new projects we released in October, HashiConf digital, and it's one of the few developer focused projects that HashiCorp has. Now we have a total of 8 open source projects. So it's a lot of projects that we all manage, and it's a lot of work. So this project is mostly focused on build, deploy, and release. The build, deploy, release kind of stages of this application delivery, life cycle. So most people kind of already understand, you need to write some code, test it, build it out, deploy, release, and then you need to, deploy it in a certain environment and operate it. It might be Kubernetes and using Terraform and so on. And then you measure things once it's deployed. And all of this happens in certain well-established stages, but certain stages are not as well-established as in an industry. So for example, if someone would write some code in Golang or Ruby, you might use an IDE, VS Code, or other amazing IDEs that exist today. You might test it, you might store it in GitHub, you might operate things in AWS or Google or Azure. You might use Kubernetes, use containers, or just use EC2 instances and orchestrate it using Terraform. Then you might measure things with Datadog and Prometheus and so on. So there are some well-established stages, particularly the code, test, and release, operate, and measure stages. But the build, deploy, release states are still in flux. There's a lot of different things that people do. People use, scripts, and they patch them up together using CI environments and so on. And more importantly, people have tried to solve, kind of this developer interface problem by giving you, things like makefiles. Makefiles work really well for, smaller scope projects, but as you're working in a larger organization, it does become difficult to scale. You have, pipelines, which are like your CI/CD pipelines that are great. For every commit, you get some form of execution. But again, as soon as you kind of, lift the curtain, you see that there's a bunch of scripts in the background, a bunch of CLI tools that are being downloaded, and there's all kinds of stuff that's going on behind the CI/CD pipeline. And then when you have, you could use like a platform as a service. There's amazing platform as a service, services that have come, even before, and even today we have a variety of these to choose from. But this is very much, all in kind of type of platform. So you do get a really nice workflow all the way from the first line of code to production. But you might need to make compromises on what you can do with that platform. So if you try to do anything else that the platform doesn't subscribe, it becomes a little difficult to use these platforms. And this is true for platforms, that are existing today and that have been built previously. So the real problem here is that we have enough choices. We know we have like Kubernetes, Nomad, Netlify, containers as a service like ACI, Google containers, Google Cloud Run. You have ECS, you have barebone EC2 instances. So you have a lot more kind of choices to choose from. And of course, like things like Docker made it very easy for, to package applications and to deploy them at scale. But the problem is really like, what's the workflow, right? How do you do this consistently across multiple environments? And this is where the kind of the build and deploy and release stages become important. And this is what's basically the focus of Waypoint here. So I'll give you some examples of how, you might see these differences and you might kind of become evident to this problem, right? You have, for example, if you're using EC2, Amazon EC2 VMs, you could use Packer to build your machine images. You could use Terraform to deploy it. You could, release it with a ELB or a public, IP or something like that. In Kubernetes, you might use Docker to build your containers. You might use Docker to push to a registry, whether this is ECR or like something else like GitHub registry or Docker registry. Then you might deploy things with Helm and then use kubectl. So clearly you see like how even the CLI tools are changing per stage, right? And then you might release the application using Helm upgrade commands or kubectl apply, or, basically do things like kubectl get service to kind of, describe your service and so on. And this might change for Google as well. So you're using Google Cloud Build, you use Google Cloud Run to deploy the container, and then get an URL from Google. And that's all Google specific. So clearly between these three platforms, you see the stages are consistent, but the tools might change per stage. And even for the same environment, you might see two different CLI tools that you might have to use. So that's where kind of Waypoint tries to solve this problem by giving you this consistent workflow of building, deploying, and releasing. And these are three distinct different things, and it'll become very evident as I show you the next few slides here. And not only do you deploy the application, but also to build confidence in validating the application. So once it's deployed, whether the application is running, you can kind of see the logs and so on. Those operations also have to be very clear. And this is where Waypoint kind of gives you those type of subcommands as first class as part of the project. And the third thing is basically the extensibility to make it work for your environment. So Waypoint does release with a lot of different plugins, but it's totally extensible like every other Hashicorp projects, like Terraform, Nomad, Vault. Everything is pluggable, and people know that about Hashicorp, and this is the exact same way Waypoint is designed to kind of extend itself here. So it all kind of boils down to this one command, which is called the Waypoint App Command, and this command is the one-stop shop to do pretty much all these three operations. Building an application. So you might use things like cloud native build packs, and then push the cloud image to a Docker registry. You might deploy it in Kubernetes. You might provide some basic config of like how to health check the application, and then you'll release the application in Kubernetes as well using the native load balancing techniques that exist in Kubernetes today, and maybe provide a port where the service is available. So all of this stuff is again defined in these stages, and they all kind of comprise in this like really simple definition, which we call the waypoint.htcl file that can exist with every project that you're using Waypoint with. So you'll define the project name, you'll define the application, define the three stages, and these three stages have equivalent, kind of equal one-to-one mapping with the Waypoint CLI as well. So you get this one file, one common language. You do this as code, you check it in your version control, you get this end-to-end build, deploy, and release type of experience. And you'll see this more clearly in the demos that we're going to do after the slides here. And then the key experience here to see is that as soon as you run the Waypoint App Command, you see, you use the local, in this case, we're using a local Docker client to build the application. Then we tag the image, we push it up to the registry. You see all that in logs and running logs. And then we release the application. And you'll notice here there are two different URLs. One's a release URL and one's the deployment URL. So the release URL is meant for kind of the public and your customer. That's the URL you expose to people that are your customers to visit your application. And the deployment URL is unique to this one Waypoint App invocation or the Waypoint deploy invocation. So this is versioned, and these are meant to kind of just test the application and share these URLs with someone that might be on your team. This is not meant for production usage. What you'll notice there's a special domain here, waypoint.run, for these deployment URLs. So you might get these really nice looking names with a version number and the waypoint.run domain name. This is the service called Horizon that we actually open source alongside Waypoint, and we are running for you. So you can run it yourself if you like, but in this case, by default, we basically use the hosted service that we manage for giving you these deployment URLs. Again, this is completely, you can deactivate this feature if you like. Now, once you deploy the application, the question is this up and is it actually working, right? And this is where Waypoint is unique from other tools that are in this category. So Waypoint actually gives you features that are more like a pass, right? So you give you features like, accessing all the data using a UI. So a lot of people, like using UIs, and that's totally okay. A lot of people like the CLI, so you can kind of use both these experiences to examine your application projects, deployments, view logs, deployment history, build history, and also execute command in context with your application in the very environments that they're running in. You can also do kind of that command invocation using the Waypoint exec command. Now, in Kubernetes case, of course, Kubernetes has a native kubectl exec command that you can use. But the uniqueness of Waypoint exec is that you can do this consistently with the same exec command on Google Cloud Run, on Azure Container Instances, on ECS, on EKS, any platform that Waypoint supports via the plugins. You can use this exec command across, and you can run things like data migration and things like that, and schema migration and so on, just using these exec commands. Also, the Waypoint Logs command gives you an idea of just the running log. So here we're not trying to remove or replace a traditional way of doing log collection. We're just giving you the runtime logs, maybe for a day or so, of whether the application is receiving traffic, just for just-in-time debugging. This is not meant for doing unique analytics on your logs and so on, but just gives you a running log of things. And this also works across all the different plugins that Waypoint supports here. And then, of course, in any software deployment cycle or life cycle, you have the CI/CD platforms, and Waypoint integrates really well with the CI/CD platforms. We have integration and support for GitLab CI/CD, Circle CI using orbs, and also Jenkins. And this is done, just by invoking the Waypoint App Command, or maybe Waypoint Deploy Command, Build Commands, and Release Commands separately. So, for example, a user might actually, build a container image for the application using the Waypoint Build Command in the build step of their CI execution, and then run maybe things like container analysis, and like just making sure that the container passes all the compliance checks and security checks, and then run the Waypoint Deploy command, and then run the Release command. So you can break this up as you need, or you could just run Waypoint App, and that should just do all three things for you here. Also, if you're using, if you're kind of subscribing to this amazing model, which our industry calls GitOps, you can use things like, the GitHub Actions or GitHub CI/CD. We did ship support for GitHub Actions at day one, and same goes for GitLab. You can use that right away, and this is available. There's a guides on it on the website to use it. So as I said earlier, like any other HashiCorp project, the Waypoint has an extensible interface to actually extend it for environments that we might not ship plugins for, or don't have plugins currently, right? So you can actually build your own plugins that are custom to your organization. These could be build plugins, release plugins, deployment plugins. You can extend Waypoint as expected. So we've learned a lot from growing the Terraform ecosystem, and we're bringing that knowledge into Waypoint as well. And we expect the Waypoint plugin ecosystem to actually extend in the same way that Terraform ecosystem has. And we've learned a lot in terms of like how to build plugin integration guides, what the plugin interface should look like. It's fairly simple to kind of extend Waypoint here. All right, so at the end, kind of sum it all up, right? Waypoint allows you to take, a bunch of your code in any language that you like, and package it in, certain formats like just binaries or using containers, and ship and deploy them in different deployment platforms like Kubernetes, Docker, ACI, Nomad, ECS, Google Cloud Run, to name a few. And the interesting thing here is that we're not defining or replacing these deployment platforms. We're just providing a better workflow in a way that's extensible and that works for your organization. All right, so quickly on what's coming up. And this is kind of a sneak peek into the roadmap of Waypoint, and talk about some of the features that you can expect now. So since the release, since the announcement in October, we've had 5 different releases. The current release is 0.15. We've had about like 3,200 GitHub stars, and this is just a vanity metric. But the stars are growing, and you can see you can kind of get some public interest here. And then also we have some significant plugin and community contributions from different people in the community, and we are really lucky to have a very vibrant community in open source. So in terms of enhancements, we have like the Hashicorp community. Really providing plugins like Google App Engine, Google Functions, and so on. This happened right after the release, which is really amazing for us to see that people are able to quickly use our extensible plugin interface and build things that works for them, at least the plugins that we didn't ship with. We also have enhancements for Kubernetes in terms of functionality and stability. So we have better detection of service states and some quality of life messages for working locally with kind and so on, and support for namespaces. Also enhancements for ECS plugins. So we have like ECS secrets support now, environment variables, sidecar containers configuration, providing the listening port for the ECS services. Also have enhancements to the UI and onboarding workflow, and then enhancements to the Nomad plugin to do things like some valid defaults and Docker auth credentials and so on. We also have enhancements to the Google Cloud Run plugin as well. And so it's the big release that's coming up, and I really excited to see Cody's demos and Jackie's demos on this, like the 0.2 release, which basically allows you to do things like config syncing. And this is a really interesting feature, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. So this allows you to kind of bring in your config values from dynamic sources like Kubernetes config maps and Vault and Console, and then actually provide that to your Waypoint applications, and then also restart the application. So this is fairly new and unique to just Waypoint here. We also have template functions like template file, template dir, template string, and this might actually be familiar to folks that use Terraform. So we have these functions when they will be available in Waypoint configuration files. Also path variables like path.project, path.app, and path.pwd, which gives you the kind of the current working directory. All of these will be available inside of Waypoint configuration as well to make it work for what you want your application to do. And also support for dynamically kind of changing configuration using the Waypoint Config Set command that would restart your application on setting config values and providing that and kind of pushing that across all your applications. And then of course we have support. We will hopefully have support for the OpenShift, kind of installation of the Waypoint server using the Waypoint install command as well, which is important portion to get Waypoint all working. All right, so I'll kind of skip this. I'll just go over this config syncing thing. I think Cody can kind of talk about, just show you in a demo how this all works. But this config syncing thing that I'm really excited about, it allows you to kind of pull in any Kubernetes config map. So you can see there, we're providing something called config dynamic, and then providing Kubernetes as the name, and then the config map name, which is block config, and then the key, which is theme. And we can pull that config in environment as environment variable, and then expose it to our application. And in this case, theme is the environment variable. Now the unique thing and the interesting thing is, as soon as this config changes, if someone updates the config map, you get this updates up all the way up to your application. And then we also automatically restart your application when any value changes. And the same applies for Vault. So you can pull in secrets from Vault. And you can also provide just static values, like in this case, database host is just Postgres SQL, which is a static value, and so on. And this is available at the app level and also at kind of the project level for applications. All right, so now I've spoken a lot of slideware. I really believe in live demos, and this should be fun. May the demo gods be with Cody and Jacquie. So off to you. I think off to Jacquie first.
Quick question, Mishra, before we cruise in. One of the questions came through. We've shown a lot of ways that Waypoint can be used in kind of this deck, and we're going to touch on some cool demos and all that. But like, in your experience, obviously you've been around Hashicorp for a long time. You've talked to a lot of customers and a lot of like practitioners in the market. How do you see Waypoint being used both today and kind of long term, right? Do you see this being more like personal projects, like Cody hosts his blog and fires it up, drops it in on Waypoint? Do you see this being something that enterprises are going to use to start pushing through? Like we've shown the CI story in there a little bit. So give me your take on where you see people actually using Waypoint. Like what's Mishra's read on the journey of Waypoint in this way?
Yeah, so my hot take is basically what you're asking.
Mishra hot take.
No, I think I've just had a unique perspective to Waypoint, as I mentioned early on, that I was involved early on in the project, and I think the goal was to really solve the problem broadly for developers, and that's why I think you see the plugin interface that allows you to consistently do certain operations across platforms. So we are going for a wider audience with Waypoint. I think at least from where I see things and in my own perspective. I think regarding like question around like this being used in enterprises, yeah, I think totally. Currently, like we do need to improve some of the kind of the IAM capabilities and so on. And once those are available, I think it should really be extensible to enterprises as well, especially with things like unique application deployment URLs and things like that. That's really helpful for people that are heavily in like compliance environments, because currently like you need to expose like your infrastructure to the world with like certain whitelisting of like certain address spaces and things like that. You don't need to do that with Waypoint. The way the Horizon service works is allows you to kind of securely ingress into your applications with that unique URL. So I think you'll see those type of features which will be very appealing to enterprises as well. That's my, I guess, personal take on this.
Awesome. That was the big question. We'll cover a couple more after. So Jacquie, I think you're up to bat.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Yeah, hopefully I can show you the way. I had to. Let me get my screen share going, and let's make sure it's set up properly, specifically that Zoom doesn't disappear on me. There's Zoom. Can you see my screen okay? Yeah, perfect. All right. So we're going to go through a bit of how to set up Waypoint. And just to kind of, before we even get started, what's already done is that I've created a GKE cluster, so Kubernetes cluster on GCP. And I've already created a public Docker Hub registry for myself to push any of my Docker images to. So that's all it's done. As you can see right here, we have, let's move Zoom out of the way. Of course, it's in the way. So as you can see over here, we have the Kubernetes. It's just kind of, it's there. It's pretty empty. That's all we want right now. And we're going to start off by doing a Waypoint install. So that's what the command looks like. We're just installing it. We're telling it what platform it is, and we're telling it we're going to accept the terms of service. We're just happily waiting.
While that's waiting, Jacquie, you told me to pitch you some questions along the way. You're installing Kubernetes now. What other platforms like do you see people using Waypoint with from a server standpoint? We're doing an install on Kube right now. Where else do you see this living?
Oh, I see that soft pitch. I'm just kidding. I mean, I've already started playing with Waypoint and Nomad, given that Nomad is my product focus here. So I've kind of started playing with that. There's, of course, Kubernetes. I feel like actually you both have played with it more than me, and you can probably cover more platforms than those two. Where do you see it?
So, I mean, we see a lot of people get started on Docker out of the gate just because it's, a very kind of quick start experience in that way. But you hit the other ones, the server lives on Nomad and Kube. There's a lot of capabilities that live uniquely to each one of those environments. So
Well, we have installed. So now that we're up and installed, I'm just going to do a quick like kubectl to show you what changed. We're going to get everything. So before we just had our basic cluster IP address. And now that we've done this install, we've got a Waypoint server running in a pod. You can see it's running, which is good. And it's ready. We have a service for it with a load balancer so we can reach it. And then we've also got a stateful set. So it's also got a persistent volume claim attached to it where it's going to keep any data. And I'm just going to go over to the browser, which is going to open in a different window, of course. Just grab that, pull it over to here. And I'm going to proceed to the IP address. So we have Waypoint up, it's running. Coming back over to my terminal. I'm just going to do a Waypoint init in my repository, or in my, what's the word I want? Wow, folder. There we go. So we're just getting it. The project's initialized. It's set up. This is a pretty common like workflow across, I guess, our products as well as a lot of different other ones. And now that that's up, just before we get into Waypoint and what the file looks like, I'm going to go ahead and generate a new token, and I'm just putting it straight into my copy so that, yeah, basically so it immediately copy pastes, pasting that in, and now we can see we've got the UI. It's got my project already there. If I click into it, I haven't run anything yet, so this is what I expect to see, just the name of the project and not really much else yet. Perfect. So where is my editor? Here we go. Before we get too far into this, we're just going to talk a little bit about the anatomy of a Waypoint file. So we're using waypoint.hcl, with HCL being our Hashicorp configuration language. And we've got a project name, we've got an app name, and we've got some labels for it to help us identify those. Getting into our build clause, so this is going to define how Waypoint builds our application, and there's different options for this. You can use, you can pack it. We're going to be using build packs. You can use Docker to kind of put out Docker images, and there's tons of other options, but those are the two we're looking at today. So yeah, our pack option is telling Waypoint that we're going to use the most relevant cloud native build pack to build this application. And since the example application is written for Node.js, what it's going to do is Waypoint's going to use Node.js build packs. Yeah, we could easily switch this over. Actually, I think I'm using Docker. Oh, meh. But Cody's going to talk a little bit more after this about the difference between using the build packs and using Docker. So after we've kind of got it built, oh, yeah, and I'll just, right here, we're just taking the reference of the commit ID instead of using a tag and maybe incrementing it every time. It's just a little bit more meaningful, I guess, because you can get the commit and see exactly which commit we pushed. Yeah, so then we move into our deploy clause. As you can see, we're using Kubernetes. And this clause defines where Waypoint's going to deploy the application. So again, there's other options. It could be doing Nomad, we could be doing Kubernetes, we could be doing something like Amazon's ECS service. They're all pluggable, so you can kind of pick where you need to go and put it in. And the idea, as Mishra covered earlier, is that the workflow should stay the same no matter what tools you're kind of plugging in. It'll be familiar and similar. Coming out of our deploy stanza, we get to the release stanza. So that kind of defines how our application is going to be released to the environment. So if we're talking about using an external, which I'm using a GK, so talking about using an external Kubernetes cluster, this is where we're doing our load balancer and we're saying what port you can reach it on. Basically, how can I find my application now that it's deployed and how do I reach it? Yeah, so let's do a Waypoint up and kind of see what happens now that that's there. So you can see it start building, and we can see it is pulling images. I've already built the Docker file a couple times, so it might go pretty fast here. We get this updating view in terminal. We can also come over to the UI and click into here. As you can see, it's already updated that I am doing a build. I can click into the build, and now in our browser, we can see all the logs coming out of this build output. So you can see what it's doing, what's happening. It's pretty nice to me. We got another view of that over here. Let's see. Oh, that's flashing. So we'll just go back to this view. So it's not flashing at people. Yeah. Any fun things to add while we're building and waiting for it to come up for?
I wish like CLI tools had background music. I think I remember Kelsey Hightower did a demo at KubeCon where he had like background music to while the things are building. It's like so, and then it should like slowly fade away as the application's ready.
That would be nice. That would be super nice because then I could just talk and there would be a music cue and it would be like, we're done. Carry on with your demo. That would be
I
great.
could totally get behind some Eye of the Tiger right now.
Just waiting for my service to come up. I don't know what I did in my terminal about an hour ago that started flashing. It wasn't doing that earlier today, but
fortunately, it's not coming through on the stream side.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so maybe it's my monitor. I don't know. I'll figure it out later. So it finished building, and now that it's there, what we have is we have a release URL, and we also have a deployment URL. So this will bring us straight to, oh, there we go, other window again. That's okay. It'll bring us straight to the application that we've just built and deployed. So here it is. As you can see, it's a Node.js app. It says it was built and deployed with Waypoint. And it wants us to make a make a change to the file and run this again to see what happens. Before we get to that, we're gonna take a quick moment. Actually, no, we'll just do it right now. That's fine. Do the change. Where's my editor? So I've already got this open. We're just gonna make a really small change over here where that was the message we got. I'm just gonna say it was built and deployed with Waypoint by Jacquie, because that's me and I built it. So yeah.
That cursive game is strong on the font there, Jacquie.
Thank you. It took me a really long time to find this font. I'm not gonna lie, like a day of searching, a dedicated day. So now that is there and it's deployed, and we're gonna do that's totally false. Now that we've changed the file, we're gonna do another Waypoint app. So it'll build it. Yeah, most of my terminal editor game has been heavily influenced by Cody because he had a blog post that he put out there, and I was like, I would like this in my life. So
So this will probably also create, I think Jacquie might need to highlight that. I think would also create unique builds. So I think each build will be a unique build, have unique build ID, and then you can you can promote certain builds at certain times and things like that. So I think that's a useful feature as well.
Thank you. That is definitely worth pointing out. I was going to be like, and look, it's a different URL, but that is definitely more informative than what I was planning on saying. So.
No, I think you do have the different URL as well, which is actually also a feature, which is great.
I like them. They're fun. It reminds me of when I was learning Docker, and then it would give you those like randomized names, and I was just so excited about it because I was like, oh, what container are we going to get today? Like, it was fun. So yeah, just waiting on my deploy. Yeah, it's not flashing on the stream. That's really good. It's basically strobe lighting on my monitor, so it's kind of, it hurts.
It definitely is flashing after all now. So.
Oh no, darn.
Not that bad though. Not bad.
False hope. All right, and it keeps opening in the other window because why would it open in the right window? That's fine. Anyway, so here's our first one, just with Waypoint down here. And then here's the one I just changed that we've now deployed that has my name. Just kind of prove that thing, it happened. So that's good. Coming back to our terminal, there's some other things that we can do with this application now that we've built it and deployed it. So a common thing you might want to do is if you're running Kubernetes or Docker or even a cluster of VMs, you probably want to be able to go into it and look at what's happening in case something has gone wrong. So if we wanted to exec into our application, we just do a Waypoint exec, and then we tell it what shell we're using. And now we should be inside of it. There we go. So now we're inside of it. I'm just gonna copy paste so that I don't typo everywhere. We go into a directory and we can see that we have, well, these are all of our directories on this container, and then we can see our application directory as well as its workspace. Could also do things like list off my processes. if I wanted to see what's running in the container, that could be helpful if you're troubleshooting. And when we've gone in and we found out the information that we want from this, we can just exit and it closes out. Another thing you probably want if you're troubleshooting is your logs. It's nice. It's just Waypoint logs. Here we go. We're listening to it. If I was running things in the container, I'd be able to see the logs coming in, but for now it's just listening. So we're going to close out of that.
So one thing to quickly call out for you, Jackie, we didn't get to talk about this earlier, but what's really powerful about like the exec and logs capability is that just because we're deploying this on I think you said a GKE cluster, doesn't mean that this is the only place that that app can be installed onto. This lab could be living in multiple different Kubernetes clusters, multiple different environments. As long as it can reach the Waypoint server, everything is good. In Jackie's case, she's using her own like kube config that's mapped here to deploy the application, which is just consequently going to the same place the Waypoint server is deployed to. But if she was to change to an EKS cluster or an AKS cluster and deploy an app too, it's highly likely that those apps are going to be able to reach back to the Waypoint server. It's totally an accepted method of use. What's really cool is when she does that Waypoint exec, it's going to go to that endpoint wherever that endpoint is at. And this becomes really powerful when you're looking at things like ECS, which is Elastic Container Service. You're looking at ACI, which Mishra talked about before. Waypoint gives you a common plane to be able to execute these commands against all of those deployment targets, not just the one that you're interacting with locally right now. It's where the application is deployed onto, and it just becomes really powerful for like a central place to be able to like manage these apps in that execution and logs kind of perspective.
I like this. I don't have any like really long commands to kind of figure out which container it is or what's going on. That might just be because it's also really simple right now. I'm sure there's other things we need to add as we add more pods or clusters into it, but it's nice that it's just, that's it. It's just 4 characters. So yeah, we've deployed it and we've checked, maybe we've done some troubleshooting, and now we've decided that this probably isn't like the version we want to use, or we're going to redeploy, or we just don't need it anymore. So we just do a Waypoint destroy, and that's going to get rid of all of our deployments for it. The rest of my cleanup, because if I do a kubectl get all, so as you can see, there's still some things here. So if I want to completely clean everything back up to a clean state, I would just be deleting the stateful set, the PVC, and well, the persistent volume claims, so we don't have the storage there. And to note that if you don't destroy the persistent volume claim, you try to start your cluster again, it's going to give you some errors and tell you that it's already exists because it's already got that data there, which is completely intended. I just might have ran into that a couple hours ago. And then finally, you just delete your service. This one takes a little bit longer. Tiny bit longer. And when that deletes, we'll be back into just a clean Kubernetes state. There will just be the same thing I showed at the very beginning of the demo with just your Kubernetes service, and everything else is cleaned up and gone. So when you need to get up and running, just this install and cleanup is just really fast. Like you're not digging through all these different servers, or kind of, it's not usually this smooth, at least in my experience so far. And there we go. So it's deleted. We do a kubectl get all. And we're back at our starting point. So that's all I've got to show for today. So I think from that, we're going to hand over to Cody, who's got some more to show you.
Oh, snaps. It's time to go.
And then I think after your demo, we'll get to the rest of the questions that have been coming in chat. I'm seeing them. We'll get to them after the demo. Yeah.
Perfect. So going a little bit of a different path than Jackie did. If I can get my terminal to repair itself. There we go. Cool. So I have an application here. I'm logged into a Kubernetes and Docker cluster. So that's a little bit of a shout out for the Kubernetes community. So using kind locally. So if I do a kube control get nodes, we can see I've got one little lonely node hanging here locally on my system. If I do get pods, we can see I've got my Waypoint server up and running. Life is looking pretty good. So I'm going to show a couple of the newer things that we're working on inside of Waypoint, namely around some of the templating capabilities that we're introducing or enhancing, I should say, as well as our config sync capabilities. So we are going to jump into VS Code. If we take a look, we've got a configuration file here right now. This is a Waypoint config. So this is just a regular old application that I've thrown together. And we got a couple of new things, or at least one major new thing in here. And what that is within this actual build block, we have this Docker, which we used before. This is what Jacquie talked about, using Docker files to do builds. But what I'm doing here is, instead of specifying a static Docker file, I've taken my old Docker file out and just renamed it to backups. This is one I used to use for building before this demo. What I've done here is I've used a function that we call template file that points to this directory and uses this Docker file template to go and dynamically generate that Docker file based on variables. So in this simple example, if I go up to this template, we can see that I've pulled in, excuse me, this theme folder here. So what it's going to do is it's going to copy the built binary from the theme directory and drop it into the right directory within my container as it builds. So this happens dynamically at the time that the waypoint is ran. In order to accomplish, I need to bring in some of our new config sync capabilities. So this command has existed in Waypoint for a while now. It's a Waypoint Config Set. And what it does is allow us to bring configs that are stored on the server into our actual build process. So I'm going to go over here, just like Jacquie, learning from the best. I'm going to do a little copy and paste. Thanks for the tip, Jacquie.
I can't type
and this
live.
brings in
Sorry, continue.
So this brings in the ability to pull configurations out from the Waypoint server. In this case, we're going to be looking for this, or we statically set this variable down here. We can actually bring this in as part of the actual application configuration by pulling in the synchronized commands as well. In this case, we're going to build the dark version of our application, which is going to pull from this dark directory up here. So I'm going to switch this over to light for starters. Looking good. So what I'm going to do first is pop back into the command line and do a waypoint init. And just like Jacquie, I will do a waypoint up, which is going to start that. And we're going to build off of Docker. And in this case, what it's going to do is to use that variable that I pulled in as part of the template file and reference it in the actual Docker template that's dynamically generated and referenced from here. This is going to push out. In a few moments, we should see the deployment URL pop up. Dockerfile builds a lot faster than the cloud native build packs do. There's something really interesting to call out here. You can see, as I mentioned before, I'm running Kubernetes and Docker. This is running on my laptop locally, in my house in Northern California right now. But when this dynamic URL pops out, this naturally evident crab, gotta love those names. Oh, we got a little bit of a CSS problem pop up there. Still coming. There we go. So the application loaded. It's in light mode. We can see it looks a little bit weird on the top, like the coloring is a little bit off. So if we wanted to be able to switch this out and do it in a dark mode, we can come back in here, switch this to dark. I'll do another waypoint up. It's running or starting to build out in Kubernetes again. So if I switch back into my terminal while it's building there. Oh, should have already came up. So that was pretty quick. Yep, V2. Let's pull up V2. Actually, what we can do is switch back here. We can come up to the URL here. We'll switch to V2. Everything looks better in dark mode. So that's great. That ran, but this is a very static approach to the actual deployment. And while it works really well to be able to dynamically generate that Docker file on the fly, so to speak, What if we want to start to bring this in more from a configuration store perspective? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrap this this waypoint file off to the side real quick. So we're just going to rename this out. We'll go out for now, and we'll bring in this other file that we're going to use to start bringing in the configuration sync capabilities. So I didn't copy and paste that, unfortunately. Did it in the other file, but not in this one. So in this case, we're switching over to the cloud native build pack again, like Jacquie was using. And we're using we're going to use a Node.js build very similar to Jacquie. And we're going to do the same application, but we're going to show how we can set this on the Waypoint server to actually pull this value in. And then from there, we're going to do the dynamic setting that Mishra talked about via Kubernetes. So right here, we've got this config block, and this is a new block that's coming in a very soon version of Waypoint. I know Jen is out in chat. She's one of our product managers for Waypoint. She'll be able to talk a little bit about where things are going from a Q&A standpoint. But this block is coming very soon. And what this block does is say, hey, pull in our configs from the server as environment variables. And the application that I built is a very simple application. We do a very basic switch off of the environment variable to switch based on light or dark mode. So what we'll do now, we've got our file set up. We're going to close this annoying little message. We'll bring it back up our terminal. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a waypoint config set. We're going to set the theme value. Actually, we'll go light since the last one we did was dark. So that is now set in the Waypoint server. And we will go ahead and do a waypoint up again. You can see we've switched into using the cloud native build pack. So it's building the image now. What we'll do is we'll do a Waypoint Ui Authenticate. I'm logged into my Waypoint server here, where I can see all of the things that have deployed. So the UI, what's really powerful about UI is it starts to bring that collaboration aspect together of what we talk about when we talk about iterating in Waypoint and building these applications. You know, Mishra or Jacquie can both get into the UI for this server instance and see what's happening for the deployments. If they wanted to go into the KubeCon demo and take a look at any live builds that are happening, they could easily come in here. We could jump on a call and talk about what's happening. So it gives us a way to be able to see context of what other people are doing inside of this environment, and a way to have kind of an aggregation of all of the resources that have been deployed in this environment. Likewise, if I head over to deployments, I can see all of the previous versions here. So if I go and hit number 2 or number 3, these are from the old version. Number 4 hasn't popped yet, but I can hit all of these still within the environment. And if you're at those of you at home can actually hit these URLs as well, and they'll work fine.
I've actually shared like one of these URLs in the chat, so I'm sure there's someone who is visiting your local computer via the interwebs.
all the hacks, right? All the hacks. So we'll pop up in a new browser. We'll hit this version 3, and that ran. So now what's really cool about this, before we did a redeployment, right? And we'd switch the value in the template, do a waypoint up, and it would go and redeploy and give us a new version. Since we're using the config capability built in, it actually doesn't need to redeploy the application anymore. We can go back into VS Code, waypoint config. Actually, what I'll do is clear that. And what we'll do is we'll switch this out to dark. Very quickly go back. And this switches on the fly now. We didn't even have to redeploy this. We're still hitting the v3 URL, and we can see that it's not, or it's actually able to dynamically change now. Or not dynamically change, it's able to change based on values. Once again, if I go back in, switch this back to light, hit refresh, takes a few moments. There it goes. And it flips back over. Again, improving the process. Now we're not rebuilding every time. We're setting these configs and letting the configs dictate how the application loads, but we can still do better. So it wouldn't be KubeCon if we weren't focused really closely on the Kubernetes store. And we know that people configure their applications largely in the Kubernetes space via things like config maps. We have the ability to dynamically source those config maps as part of this running configuration. So we can use that Kubernetes control loop that is so powerful in the way the API reference goes back through and references itself to check configs. We can use that control loop to apply these configuration changes as well. So back into VS Code we go, and we'll hit this config map. And we can see this config map is set to deploy out a config map named theme with a key called tone dark. We'll go out and we'll edit our waypoint config here. And we'll drop in this configuration. We'll apply our config map. Now, since we're bringing in this dynamic configuration, we do need to run a waypoint up again. But now, once we do that waypoint up, that dynamic config will be there forever and always until we at least pull down the application. So we'll go and do our, oops, I put it in the wrong file. That would have been a demo fail. Gracefully avoided. So we bring in this config dynamic block. We tell it to use Kubernetes. We'll be able to support things like Vault, things like Console to source these configuration values as well. In this case, we're just using Kubernetes because we really want to tell a Kubernetes-centric story as part of the joys of being at KubeCon. We're looking for the config map named key or theme and using the tone key. So once again, we'll go in, we'll run our waypoint up. Go and do this deploy. If we pop back into the UI, we go into our builds, we can see this one building. So we get that live updating that it's actually running through that build process now. We can see the exact flow of everything that's happening. Like I said, Mishra could see this, Jacquie could see this if they had access to the server at least. Finish building. Go into our deployments. Oh, actually, you know what? That reminds me. I was wrong. I actually don't think it's it may or may not actually generate a new URL since it's just enabling the config sync. We'll see in a moment.
Zoom in a little bit on the text. It's a little small.
In VS Code?
I can't quite see where exactly you are because I've got the zoom view, but it looks, I think the browser text looks pretty small.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. So that is because of the Waypoint UI. So that's what that was referencing. So there we go. Zoomed in there. So we did actually get a.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Sorry about that. Perfect.
No, it's all good. So we got a new deployment URL after all. So I was wrong twice. And we're back on dark mode again. We'll make a quick change. We'll go into that config map. Switch it back to light. We'll apply that config map. And that control loop takes a few seconds to run. It's not, checking as a webhook every single time it fires off. It takes a little while for it to actually restart the service, but in a few moments here, there it goes. It restarted the service, not the pod. So the pod has not crashed. The pod is still running. 0 restarts on any of those pods, but it was able to flip over to that light mode of the application again. So you see this, what this brings is a really powerful capability of bringing some of these application configurations directly into Kubernetes very dynamically. We do this today with Vault in the sense of running a sidecar that brings this in. But when we deploy with Waypoint, we can hook directly into that process and bring those variables in as part of the running state of the system. And that's all thanks to the entry point that we're using to put in front of the application. This lets us start to configure things it gets really interesting when you look at bringing in things like database configurations, things like actual application gating. So being able to enable or disable certain features of an application based on a running environment variable. So it's really interesting to think about the model of being able to very dynamically bring these configurations in and letting them be applied on the fly as you make these changes to either server or you apply a new config map as part of your deployment. So pretty excited for this. Also, again, really excited for the dynamic configs via like the templating setup, right? So in this case, going back into my VS Code, in this case, I was using the template against the Docker file, but you think about it, in this example, I'm running Nginx to host this application. I could have dynamic configurations for my Nginx server as well, and have those be created on the fly and pushed into the server as part of that actual build out. We can get really creative around creating like the Kubernetes deployment YAMLs. So if we wanted to pipe in some additional values into those to set up things like, you know, traffic splitting and service mesh as an example, these are all things that are possible thanks to the templating. So it's pretty exciting, and really excited for this to get into the wild and see how people use it. That wraps my big parts of my demo, Mishra. So I think it's back to you to wrap on. Any questions come through that you want to cover?
I think there was one question regarding release cadence, which we wanted to answer. Cody, do you want to answer that one, or?
Sure. Let me see here. I know that came up, and there was a note on that one.
Yeah, there's a note one on. Yeah.
I think Jen also just answered it in chat.
Perfect.
Oh, okay, perfect, awesome.
That
Thanks,
works.
Jen. It's really, yeah. Also, we're happy to have Jen, who's the product manager of Waypoint, with us. So it always helps coming directly from the PM. All right, so I'll share my screen again quickly. This one. All right, so the Waypoint project.io website has pretty much everything that you need, all the links that you need, the tutorial links and the docs, CLI links, plugin links, the community links, and the GitHub repository links that you need. So you can check that out. Also has the plugin development guide that you can use to build your own plugins. The Hashicorp Learn platform, which is learn.hashicorp.com/waypoint, has all the tutorials that you might need. And some of these tutorials are actually interactive. So you can, spin up a shell during your tutorial. You don't need to spin any infrastructure up, and you can follow along and use the commands quickly and learn Waypoint fairly easily. And how do you get involved? So the Discuss forum is your way to ask questions, and we're fairly active in the community Discuss forums, which is discuss.hashicorp.com. Find the Waypoint category, and you can ask questions there. The plugin development, again, as I said, the Waypoint project.io URL has links to those guides. And then we also hosting community office hours soon, this is I guess the first official one, I think. I think there's one that Cody did early on with the Terraform team, but I think this is, I guess, the formal first KubeCon special one, and you might see many of these type of events in the future. And that's it. Thank you so much. And I think I don't know if you still have time. I think we're just exactly at an hour mark here, but we can definitely take some questions if there are some questions.
I know one came through around how customizable is the URL. So that URL is generated by a service that a project we internally call Horizon. It's an open source project, so we released that along with Waypoint. It was kind of an underlying technology, so we didn't necessarily make a big show of Horizon itself. You can host Horizon yourself. Today we don't have a lot of docs for that. It's a very young project that was really specific to what we were accomplishing here. But using that, you can get pretty granular. I think you've done that before, Mishra, right? You've set up your Horizon with a custom URL behind it. So maybe you want to answer a little bit on this, but that URL is definitely customizable or shut offable, disableable, right? If you don't want to use it for like compliance reasons or something. So go ahead. Mishra.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. What I was going to say is, it's definitely an opt-in. You can easily turn that off, and that setting is in your when you host the Waypoint server. You can just set that setting saying you don't want to use these Horizon URLs. But you can create your own, own Horizon cluster, and it's all, as Cody said, the documentation definitely it needs to be improved a little bit on the Horizon, host your own Horizon thing. But on the other hand, the Horizon URLs, again, a note, those URLs are meant for development environments. I wouldn't use those for customer facing stuff because they have some rate limits and so on, so that we can actually run the service at scale. But yeah, it means that's kind of the story and I think in the future you'll see some native integrations with things like service meshes, which includes Console Connect and Istio and other meshes in the future. And then those will allow you to actually safely ingress traffic in more like a production environment. But today you can use the platform specific, way of releasing things. In Kubernetes, it might be load balancers. In ACI, it might just be, I think they give you an IP and a DNS, and same with, I think Google Cloud Run, you get a URL as well. So those are the URLs you want to use for like ingressing traffic into your applications. Cool. Any other questions?
I think that's all we had at the moment, but we can give it a couple more seconds because it'll take about 20 seconds for the audience to hear us ask if there's more questions. But yeah.
Well, I hope everyone had a great KubeCon. I know I enjoyed it. It was like I was working through a bunch of different events at the same time. I think the same day. I don't know what happened there. There's some scheduling issues. But on the other hand, I think it was a lot of fun to see some of the talks at KubeCon. What about you? I think, Cody, did you see some talks? Jackie, I think you were involved in some panels and so on.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to see any yet. I was on my first panel yesterday, and then there's today, and tomorrow we'll be doing another one of these with Nomad as well. So
awesome.
Yeah,
that's exciting.
How about you, Cody?
I had so I did a fun stream yesterday on console and Vault in Kubernetes, so that one was a lot of fun. Caught a couple sessions today. I stayed pretty close to the service mesh space, so watched a few from that today. And have another stream tomorrow on federated, or helping out with federating console. So should be a busy KubeCon as always.
I think the last question we had come in was for a link for the Horizon repository.
I think Michael Lang, a friend in the Nomad team, has shared this already. It's just Hashicorp/Horizon on GitHub.
And Taylor is squeezing in one last question.
Always.
Always. What is the next thing you plan to implement with Waypoint? Like, is it a personal project or something else?
Cody, you go first.
I do want to take, so I run a blog that runs on a static site generator. So I do want to take that off of the current CI that I have it running on, and have it run inside of Waypoint, mostly because I want to redesign the blog anyway. So I think there's like a lot of value in doing that now. So that's probably the first big thing I'm gonna do, but I'm really interested in like the plugin development stuff. So you saw me using like the VS Code thing. So I've Mishra and Jackie both know about this. I've been tooling around with just playing, like, more from a community standpoint, playing with a VS Code plugin. So just looking at some alternative ways to interact with Waypoint, right? Like that are beyond just jumping into a terminal session and running commands. Like how can I interact with this in the same way that I do, like that I write my code, because I write in VS Code as well. So that'll probably be more of where I play more so, is in building some of that stuff out. What about you, Mishra?
Okay, I guess I was gonna ask
Ping pong
Jackie
around
first.
Canadian standoff. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. I'm planning on trying to build a release pipeline, because I would like to build the same application out in Nomad and Kubernetes, and trying to see what that looks like from a Nomad versus Kubernetes standpoint of how do CSI plugins work, how do they look, like what changes between them and CNI and all those good things, and then doing that with Waypoint. Just want to see how it goes. Yeah.
That's exciting. I did a bunch of static sites. Like I'm very boring when it comes to these type of things. I would much rather, write a plugin that probably helps other people. But I think on my own personal side, I think just hosting local static websites. I did a website for the Waypoint authors, so all the people that created Waypoint, that's hosted and deployed using Waypoint. So that's exciting. I think that's pretty much it. Like that's not too much work. I'm mostly focused on plugin development and trying to see where we would want to add a plugin and kind of help the community that way.
And I think the last question we had come in is around what the roadmap for Nomad integration with Waypoint is.
Yeah, I think regarding as far as I know, we already have a plugin for Nomad, and I think that covers like the basics. So it's like just deploying a job with with one container in it, and you can define some of the basic things like the data center name and so on. And that's kind of the basics right now. But I think you'll see both the Kubernetes and hopefully the Nomad plugins evolve with based on the community requests on things that might be appropriate. I think the big thing which will help both the Kubernetes and Nomad plugins is hopefully adding things like canary deployments and stuff like that, traffic shaping. I think those would be very useful for both the cluster schedulers, because I think that's one of the big problems that we see in Kubernetes as well, is like how do you ingress traffic into the cluster? How do servers communicate with each other? Like how do you do traffic routing, traffic shaping based on cookies, host name based, and all those different types of things that developers love. I think that those would be hopefully the kind of the focus going forward as we build Waypoint up. But please feel free to ask questions and discuss and GitHub and create GitHub issues to kind of guide us through that. Some of these issues might already be open. So if you feel, you feel very strongly towards one platform or the other, please use the emojis, kind of the different, thumbs up and, all the different emojis on those issues to allow us to kind of measure that and gauge how to prioritize this in the backend.
What's interesting about the Nomad plugin, there was a Discuss forum post that came up around console integration. A Discuss member was trying to write that for Nomad, and one of the engineers, a great guy on the Waypoint engineering team, and I sat together and kind of played with that a bit, just because most of my background's in console. And what you realize is that like getting these things up and running in Nomad is just really easy because of like the framework and the groundwork that the Nomad team's already put in place. And I know that I've talked with them about like the same thing you mentioned, Mishra, around the canary deployment and how we can start to bring that in. I think once you get the console integration in from Nomad, it kind of opens the door to a lot of these, like the traffic control scenarios and stuff like that. But even beyond that, like as Nomad firms up ingress strategy, being able to tie into that as part of like the release plugins, I think that's a really exciting place to be, and looking forward to getting with the Nomad team and starting to build that out more. I think it's going to be a really exciting journey for Nomad, just because a lot of the stuff that you typically have to bolt on inside of Kubernetes comes kind of out of the box in Nomad in a lot of ways. So I'm just excited to see us start to hook into that, since those APIs already exist and we can tie right into that.
Exciting.
Yes, I think that's all that we had for questions. Just in chat, Jen wanted everyone to know that she is regularly in the Discuss forums and GitHub, and she wants to hear what your issues are and the gaps that you see, so that we can get that feedback into a roadmap and get some timing on it, just to add on to Mishra's point. And yeah, I guess that's kind of the end of it. The next one we have of these, I believe, is the Nomad one. There might be one during the afternoon, but you can check at Hashicorp Community Office Hours, and we have them all listed there. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for doing the demo with me.
Yeah.